goes up against Green Bay's secondary. Last week he got shut down by TJ Carey. I don't think you'll see that type of skill set in the Green Bay secondary, and he's only 5,000. As a possession receiver on a full PPR site, I really like him. And then two guys that I think are still within play at the lower end of things. I really like Stevie Johnson this week. Antonio Gates is still questionable. If he plays, I think that downgrades Stevie Johnson just a little bit. But Stevie Johnson should be on your radar at 3,900. And another guy is Jamison Crowder for Washington. Washington's going to have to move the ball at some point, even if it's in garbage time. And Carolina is actually, they have a very good secondary, but their one weakness in that secondary is the slot corner, whose name I will not try to pronounce. I'll give you the initials, BB, if you want to look it up. And I think that Jamison Crowder at 3,800 will achieve cash game value simply by volume. I would not be surprised to see him end up with 6 catches for 60 yards. If we're going one, I'll give you one GPP play here because I know I'm getting long-winded. I love Golden Tate this weekend. A lot of the upper-end wide receivers, we're talking Julio Jones, Alshon Jeffrey, I've already mentioned Larry Fitzgerald, and a few others have very difficult matchups, including folks like Monte Davis, Akeem Talib, and so forth. Well, Calvin Johnson goes up against the aforementioned TJ Carey, who is the number 3 coverage cornerback in the league right now. And I think that Carey, at this point in their respective careers, can likely really stifle Calvin Johnson this week. And this is a game that I do project as being a shootout. And if Carey is shutting down, to some degree, Megatron on one side of the field, that's going to leave Golden Tate going up against DJ Hayden, who is one of the worst cornerbacks in the league. I think Matt Stafford looks to him early and often, and he's only 4,600.
Wide receiver position for you, Jeff. Who do you like in Week 11?
Well, that's a good list to start from, but let's keep building there because there's plenty of wide receivers, like John said. So I think Danny Amendola has to be mentioned for only $4,000. I think for Monday night, he drops right into the Julian Edelman slide at $4,000. He's a must play at that price. I think he's way underpriced. I think he's going to hit 5 times value, if not more. Same team, a little bit pricier, a little bit more of a tournament play. Brandon LaFell at 4,300. Again, New England is fit to score a lot of points. LaFell's getting a lot of targets. The running game is a question mark, but Tom Brady is not. So I think that LaFell is a good play there. We mentioned Derek Carr as a good option. I think that the good option to pair with him, if you're going to do a stack, is Michael Crabtree for $6,000. He's just been having a great season all season long, and he's cheaper than Amari Cooper. He's virtually the same producer. If you're going to go with Tyrod Taylor, you have 2 options. You have Sammy Watkins at 4,800 and a great punt play category option, Robert Woods at 3,400. Both those guys, you could probably put both those guys in, do a super stack, and have quite the upside there if Tyrod hits for 2 long touchdowns. We mentioned both Browns for Arizona. Carson Palmer, can you look to John Brown if he's healthy? 5,200, or Jerome Brown at $3,000. You can easily put in John Brown as your flex spot, or even as a wide receiver. And on Monday night or Monday before the game, if you hear that he's out, just flip Jerome Brown in and be happy. He's going to get probably about 80% of his production, if not more. Probably more if he finds the end zone. That's my main list for wide receivers. I think that's a pretty good list. Like I said, there's a long list to look at, and I would definitely look at your quarterback options. I think that you can pair the Denver guys with Osweiler if you want to do a stack there. Lots of options at the wide receiver spot. I think there's a short list for running backs, long list for wide receivers this week.
Yeah, I definitely see that as well, Jeff. And you're up with tight ends, and again, kind of a bunch of cheap tight ends out there. Who do you like in Week 11?
Well, you got to start with Gronkowski, who just seems to own Buffalo career-wise. At 7,700, he seems a little pricey, but sometimes he produces. So he's both a cash and a tournament option for me. And there's plenty of money to go around this week, especially if you're going cheaper quarterbacks. So you can easily fit Gronkowski in for your lineup. And as we look at the age value on our interactive value charts on Football Guys, at some point, if you're going all value, you have to spend up somewhere. So Gronkowski is a good place to play or pay up. I do like Greg Olsen against Washington. I think that the Washington secondary is terrible. at 6,200. He's both a cash and tournament option. The rest of the guys are more, we mentioned the Baltimore guys. They're cheap enough they could be considered cash or tournament. It doesn't really matter at that price point. They can probably get your value. I think you'll get 4 catches and 40 yards again for both. I'll mention 3 more guys as tournament guys. First one is Eric Ebron at $3,500, and this is just beating on the Raiders. That's all we're doing here is just beating on the Raiders who can't cover. They just can't cover tight ends. Last week, we mentioned Kyle Rudolph as a possible guy. He dropped a touchdown, and Red Ellison scored a touchdown as the backup tight end. So tight ends just feast on Oakland. So Eric Ebron, you might not think about it, but odds are it's probably 50-50 he scores a touchdown. Jason Witten at 5,100. I think he's a great option for Tony Romo. He's the go-to guy over the middle. He's going to get open. I think that he's a good, solid play. He's a little bit pricier at 5,100. He falls right in that cheap guy versus Gronk category. So a lot of people won't be on him, but I think he's a good tournament play. It'll be lower owned. And the last guy, I didn't mention Russell Wilson, but I think Russell Wilson is a decent tournament play, and I would pair him with Jimmy Graham, or even you got another wide receiver, Baldwin, at 3,500. Again, you can go super stack for Seattle. Seattle is, I understand the philosophy about going with Lynch and he could explode, but Seattle's struggling to run the ball. So if they're struggling to run the ball, Russell Wilson hasn't had a big game yet either. So he can easily throw the ball around, throw for a couple of touchdowns, run one in for himself. You could be looking at a double bonus quarterback situation, which he provided last year with 100 yards rushing and 300 yards passing against a very suspect San Francisco team.
Every single segment, Pasquino's robbing me of punt play. Every damn time. All right, John, you're much more friendly to me. So, John, please give me some tight ends in Week 11.
Yeah, I think that this is the position that's kind of barren of selections this week in terms of cash games and solid selections. Certainly, I agree that Gronk is always in play, as he showed us last week. I think the injury to Julian Edelman, as was pointed out during the wide receiver section, is something that we need to be cognizant of. Gronkowski should see some increased targets there at 7,700. He's certainly in play against the Buffalo Bills. Guys that I think are still in play at the lower end for cash games, I really think that we should be looking at Jacob Tamme in Atlanta. Atlanta's actually got the second highest team total this week, and I pointed out during the wide receiver section that Julio Jones is likely to be shadowed by Vontae Davis. Now, while I don't think that Vontae Davis will completely shut him down, I do think his amount of volume that he's been seeing, I mean, he's seen 47 targets over the past 3 weeks. There's no way he's going to get that type of attention with Vontae Davis shadowing him. And I think that a lot of the overflow should probably go to a guy like Jacob Tamme, who actually has 10, 12, 6, 5, and 10 targets over the past 5 weeks. He's averaging almost 7 targets per game, which is third highest on the team behind Julio and Devontae, and he's offered up at 3,600. I think this is a good spot for him to get some additional volume, and I think he's fairly safe to get your 10 points necessary for your cash games. A guy I mentioned earlier as a GPP option, I think, is also a cash game play, and that is Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has been seeing increased volume in the Eagles' offense over the past several weeks. He's got 24 targets over the past 3 weeks, and he has been heavily looked at in the red zone. He's not yet landed one in terms of hitting pay dirt and getting that touchdown, but I think this could be a situation where he does. But again, even if he doesn't at 3,100, I think he's minimal risk because he needs a combination of 4 catches and 50 yards or 5 catches and 40 yards in order to get there. The GPP option I would be looking at was already said by Jeff, but I'll just throw it out there again. I think Jimmy Graham is in a great spot here. The thing about the Seattle game, I'll go back to it. Seattle is going to score a lot of points at some point. This week looks like a great week for them to do so, and I think you just kind of have to plant your flag, as our pal Cecil would say. Plant your flag and decide, is it the running game or is it the passing game? If it's the passing game, I think you run that Russell Wilson, Jimmy Graham stack out there, and if it's the running game, it's Marshawn Lynch. But either way, both of those are strong GPP plays because not a whole lot of people are high on the Seahawks defense this season.
See, I say plant your flag, and Pasquino says capture the flag, especially when it says punt play and has all my guys on it. John, you're up with defenses as we round out the player section. Defenses you like in Week 11, John?
Well, you can only play so many Seahawks, but the one Seahawk you should have in your lineups this week is the Seahawks defense going against Blaine Gabbert and the San Francisco 49ers. I don't remember a team total being this low over the entire season into last season. The implied team total for San Francisco this week is 13.75. If they score 2 touchdowns, they will have gone over. This is a great situation for the Seattle defense. They are pricey at $4,000, but I think there's enough value at both the running back and wide receiver position that you can certainly slot them in. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, I think Carolina is an option at $3,400. They are playing at home against Kirk Cousins, who I look to have a typical Kirk Cousins day, not what we saw last week against the New Orleans Saints. He should come back to earth in this one, and they are, as I said, $3,400. As far as a GPP play, I think you could go a number of different ways here. I'll just throw 2 of them out. I think Denver is interesting at $3,900. In this case, I think you're paying up to be contrarian. Most people are going to pay $4,000 rather than $3,900, and they'll take Seattle, which looks like a sure thing, over Denver, who got lit up, so to speak, last week against Kansas City. We have to remember that Denver was missing 2 key players last week in the form of Aqib Talib and DeMarcus Ware. Those guys, I believe both are back this week. Cecil can confirm.
Ware is not.
Ware is not back, but Talib is. But even so, I still think this is a decent situation. We know that Jay Cutler can be turnover prone, and he's certainly proud enough to be throwing into those tight coverage that we're certainly going to see in that Denver secondary. So I think that you're paying up there to be a bit contrarian, but they have the type of upside that any defense has. And if you want to go a bit lower,